crypto front in terms of Bitcoin mining. Do we need to see that threat abate in order for Bitcoin to emerge from what some people are already calling its next winter?
Oh, yeah, listen, Vic, it's been very volatile, but let's just go back and look at it 30,000 feet. It was roughly 8,000 last July. It's in the mid 30s today. If we didn't have that blow off top, I think people would have been very happy with Bitcoin's trajectory. But I think the point that you're making is that, yes, China put a hurt on Bitcoin, but long term, I think that's very positive. Because remember, everybody's worried about Bitcoin's effect on the environment. We just learned from the Bitcoin Mining Council that Bitcoin mining is now 56% renewable. With China out of the picture and all those coal-fired electric plants in China, Melissa, out of the picture, that ratio is going to continue to increase. And when you see things like what's going on in El Salvador and the continued expansion of Wall Street firms adopting Bitcoin and other funds like Ethereum, we just launched an Ethereum fund as an example, July 1st. I'm long-term positive on what China is doing. China getting out of the way, I think, will be a long-term positive for Bitcoin.
Happy Bitcoin Monday, freaks. First Bitcoin Monday ever. Usually we do join you on Tuesdays. I appreciate all of you who are joining us today instead. We had to move some scheduling around to make this very important conversation happen. It's a conversation that I'm looking forward to. This is Citadel Dispatch episode 30, the interactive live show about Bitcoin, distributed systems, privacy, and open source software. I just want to do a quick shout out, as I always do, to the ride or die freaks who join us every week in the chat, in the live chat, and make this show what it is. It's a very special experience having such an active audience that are just always participating and helping move this, Bitcoin education forward. This show would not be the same without you guys. I also want to thank all of the freaks who constantly support this show with their sats. I want to keep this show completely audience supported with no ads and no sponsors. I think it aligns incentives the best. And I can't do that without your support. So I do appreciate that. The easiest way you can support the show is via Podcasting 2.0. You can look up different podcast apps that support that. That's newpodcastapps.com. And you can stream sats directly to the show as you're listening. It's pretty cool. As I see the day after I post it, I just see sats start coming into my wallet, just streaming in as people are listening. It's really fucking powerful. You can also support the show if you're watching the video stream through the LN URL, QR code on the bottom left of your screen, or going to citadeldispatch.com. You can support via tippin.me if you prefer Lightning, or you can support with the Samurai Paynim. My Paynim is Young Poetry 985. I'm pretty proud of that randomly generated Paynim. It's like one of 6 I have, and this is the one I like the best. So with all that said, I do appreciate all you freaks. We have a very important conversation today. We have Samurai Wallet joining us, someone who I've been trying to have a conversation with publicly for a while. We were kind of waiting for him and his co-founder, T-Dev, to rip one in person. And we're still going to do that, but it's such an important conversation that I think it needn't wait. So we're here to have it, and I'm very appreciative to have him here. How's it going, Samurai?
Yeah, thank you very much for having me, Matt. It's been a long time coming.
As his NIM makes it obvious, he is the co-founder of Samurai Wallet, the best Bitcoin privacy wallet that exists today, in my opinion.
Thank you. Thank you for all the love, Matt.
We also have, I'm a user, and I love your wallet. We also have Open Arms joining us. Open Arms is a constant return guest, very big in the Bitcoin privacy scene. He's someone I respect a ton, very close friend. So I'm very happy to have him here for this conversation. How's it going, Open Arms?
Hello both. I'm very happy to be here. Hello for all the freaks. Yeah, I'm myself, as you can see my profile picture in there. I am a Payneham from the beginning. I've been joining Bitcoin Twitter, and I'm a user of Samurai Wallet. I do share the opinion that it is absolutely the best on mobile, and it is, absolutely best for the use case and the UX for CoinJoin is just you cannot really do better at the moment. So yeah, let's dive into it.
So yeah, we're going to dive into everything.
Thank you both. I just have to say that's real nice of you to say, and thank you, Matt, for all the coverage that you've given us on this podcast and on Rabbit Hole Recap as well.
Samurai, for whatever it's worth, this show is a live show, and I am realizing that I'm hearing a little bit of extra sound coming from your microphone. So I guess the easy fix is just to keep yourself muted when you're not speaking. I think you've realized that on your own, but just double checking. So this is kind of a follow-up conversation to, well, first of all, the first 29 dispatches, because even though we do hit different nuanced topics every dispatch, Bitcoin privacy has obviously been a major theme of Citadel Dispatch to begin with. It's one of the reasons I started the show in the first place. It's a topic that doesn't really get that much. It just doesn't get that much open discussion. I think a lot of people are afraid to talk about it. I think a lot of people's incentives are set up in ways that they don't want to talk about it. So I've taken it on myself, and the Rider to Freaks who join us in the audience every week we've taken on ourselves to just talk about this more openly. I think the most important thing as Bitcoiners for us to realize is that we want to have open, transparent discussions about these important topics. As soon as you stop talking about things openly, you just regress. But it's also specifically a follow-up to Citadel Dispatch 15, which was with Wasabi co-founder No Power and Open Arms joined me, and Citadel Dispatch 16, where I had the two lead maintainers of Join Market on, Waxwing and Chris Belcher. So those are the three main Bitcoin privacy tools that exist today. And fortunately for us, this is the trifecta. We have the trifecta here on Citadel Dispatch. As always, you can listen to these episodes through your favorite podcast app, or you can go to citadeldispatch.com, where you can have links to bitcointv.com, which has full video archives, which you can download, you can torrent, you can share, all for free, because that's the way I think it should be done. So I think there's a lot of places we can start in this conversation. I think I think the first topic we should start with is KYC and the dangers of KYC. I think a lot of public Bitcoiners have ties to KYC services, regulated services. KYC is know your customer. It's when a regulated service asks you for your selfie and maybe your passport or your license and your address, your mailing address and your name, and does all these different checks on you. And usually that does get combined with all your Bitcoin information that they hold, whether that's withdrawal addresses or deposit addresses, the amount you bought. These companies, these regulated companies are the most profitable businesses in the space, and they have long reaches, and a lot of public Bitcoiners are tied into them, so they don't want to talk about it or talk against it. So Samurai, I mean, you've been very outspoken about the danger of KYC. You want to start us off here?
Yeah, sure. So we've been outspoken about KYC, like you said, since pretty much we started in 2015. And our primary kind of cry is that KYC is it's a creeping disease, meaning it didn't start with us having to take photos of our selfies with our photo IDs and having to provide all this information. It's gradually worsened to this point, and it's going to continue to get worse. So by tolerating it a little bit now, you're setting yourself up for failure in the future. You're setting yourself up for much worse protocols in the future. Obviously, that's like a battle cry that is doomed to fail ultimately, obviously. But it's still an important battle cry to be had, and for users to hear, because we're at the point now where KYC is so normalized in our culture that the concept of non-KYC acquisition of Bitcoin is to some new coiners is completely alien, completely foreign. They hadn't even thought of it. It never even occurred to them. So continuing to spread the message about the importance of that, is important. The risk. Sorry, just my final point. The major risk, as Matt you alluded to, in the context of practical privacy concerns, is that it's not possible. It's definite that the exchange that you're using, if it's a regulated entity, is sharing that information with a chain surveillance firm, whether that's Chainalysis or something else. And so a profile is being made of you and your transactions based on that KYC history.
Yeah, I mean, I think you made a very important point there, that especially, more Bitcoiners that have been in this space for a longer time might not realize, or like a nuance that they don't realize is for a while, Bitcoin was like the exception to the rule. KYC is everywhere from the day of our birth. Just constant surveillance and tagging. Even stuff like license plates, like you drive around and you just got your little KYC plate on the front. So a lot of these new users, it's just what they expect. Like if you sign up to Venmo, you're going to have KYC when you sign up to Venmo. So it's something that they're used to. But as Bitcoiners that have been around, we've seen it creep into the system. It was like Bitcoin was like one of the last bastions of no KYC. And just over the last 2 years, even 3 years, it's just literally crept into everything. Even like the renegade exchanges and stuff have all basically bent the knee to KYC.
Yeah.
And
the worst part is not even bending the knee. It's willingly going to the regulator and willingly over complying to curry favor or perceived favor with the regulator in their country. We've seen a lot of that going on as well.
100%. And I mean, one of the things that you mentioned is that pretty much all of these services are sharing that information with these chain surveillance companies that are providing them some kind of regulatory compliance, in quotations. But what also people should realize is even if you're coming from the angle that you trust the exchange you're using, or the custodian, the regulated custodian you're using, if it's a custodial wallet that requires KYC, and even if for some reason you trust the chain surveillance company, all this information is going to get leaked eventually. Like we've seen that as information gets stored online, it eventually gets leaked. I mean, I saw a headline come out that like Guess Clothing today announced that in like February they leaked a bunch of social security numbers and stuff because they got hacked. So it doesn't really matter where your personal information is. The one key trend we see is that this personal information, once it's on the internet, once it's stored and logged, and one of the things with KYC information is that by regulatory standards, they're expected to hold it for many years. So it's sitting there for a very long time. Is that it will get leaked eventually. And one of the elements of Bitcoin is that people who are bullish on Bitcoin, myself included, I believe that this chain will be around forever. I think this chain is going to outlive me. So when you have records that tie yourself to your Bitcoin, at any point in the future, if that information gets out, there's a whole trail that they can follow if you're not practicing Bitcoin best practices in terms of privacy.
Absolutely. And one of the things I think a lot of people also forget and look over is that Bitcoin privacy, it works pretty well when you're talking about a system that's pseudonymous, right? And that's the system that Satoshi designed. When you start attaching a real life record, a real life KYC record to the chain, it starts to become not good enough at all and a privacy nightmare. So the dangers of KYC can't be overstated. And I think everyone has a duty to try to start to think about how they can acquire their stack through other methods. And for a lot of people, They're productive people. They can produce things, and they have services and goods that they can create to offer, and they should do those things and offer those things for Bitcoin. Earning Bitcoin is one of the most liberating things, feelings in the world, I feel. And it really puts this whole conversation, in a different perspective once you're an earner of Bitcoin.
Yeah, I think one of the things here, right, is that as a Bitcoin circular economy develops, kind of what you just mentioned, where people instead of buy Bitcoin, they earn Bitcoin, and instead of selling Bitcoin, they spend Bitcoin. It distributes. You end up not having all these centralized platforms that are the gatekeepers, right? And as a result, it'd be way more difficult to enforce KYC, AML laws on all those individual actors. Like if you're going to, enforce it on some random ass bodega in downtown New York City, it's a lot different than trying to do that versus doing it to Binance, which is a massive multinational corporation now. But in the short term, it presents a major threat to most Bitcoiners. I think, I'm just speculating here, but I would say over 90% of new coiners that come in, new Bitcoin users that come in, are coming in fully KYC'd, right?
I mean, yeah, I would assume it's a large percentage of the new coiners that are coming in, because, like we said, it's just a regularized occurrence, and it's a similar onboarding process to Venmo and PayPal and those types of things. It's familiar to them.
Open Arms, do you think we've missed any nuance here in terms of KYC? What are your thoughts?
I completely agree what you have said. I mean, Bitcoin is an immutable public open ledger. It never meant to be paired with any kind of personal information. It should be cheap and easy to generate a new identity for you or for anyone else anytime. And if we do it in the other way, and we keep databases of every metadata we can imagine, then it will grow to be a surveillance tool we can not imagine. So that's kind of, even in a Bitcoin future, there is a dark future, which is the KYC one. And the circular economy, or the normalization of the privacy tools is the road towards the brighter future. So I completely agree there. Regarding KYC practices, I would like to kind of point out a couple of things which I don't know what you think about these, and maybe you don't have it in the US that easy, but there is this phenomenon which is, I call it KYC light, where you basically still send a bank transfer under your name, and you probably need to provide like an email address, or even in case of BISC, if you are doing an online transfer, you actually exposing your name, uncovering your name and bank account or your companies to the seller. But this happens to like loads of little services which are nowadays moved to Switzerland instead of like being based in other places. I don't want to do like an advertisement, but the point is there that they are not keeping any data, but they would be able to get the data from the bank through their bank relationships, because the Swiss laws are that you need to kind of sign a message with the private key of your address currently, which you are withdrawing to. So they have proof that they are sending Bitcoin to a person who has actually initiated the bank transfer, so they can have their KYC data from their bank. But there is at least not an extra database which could leak. And I mean, obviously, in case of a subpoena or some kind of similar situation, it could be still, it's still a centralized thing which could be leaked. But it's a bit better than like registering on a big exchange where you just need to give everything, and it just sits there and sending you out marketing emails in Punch and stuff.
We should, a lot of the DCA smaller companies use this type of technique that Open describes. We should be careful of celebrating anything like this, though. because it's just the progression of KYC becoming more usable and more user friendly. Just shows how much further it has become ingrained in society. The reason that they allow this to happen is because they can get every detail they need from the bank, as you mentioned, in the possibility that they may need it. And the issue is the spectrum for why governments may think they need access to this information is very fluid. And the EU proclaims to have strong privacy laws, and this is where SEPA, is used for this type of transaction that you described, which is an EU-based settlement and transfer system for traditional banks in the EU. So it's not a celebration. I think that it's positive that there's not an additional database that is being maintained, but the underlying issue isn't that it's just a data storage and data hygiene issue. Then the underlying issue is it's a fundamental undermining of our freedoms and our freedom to transact.
So there's a couple interesting points here. The first point, I think that I try and highlight a lot, but it gets glossed over, is that obviously this is a Bitcoin show. So I focus on Bitcoin privacy concerns specifically. But our traditional payment rails are fully KYC'd to the hilt. This is not an issue that is isolated to Bitcoin. In a lot of ways, traditional banking is worse. And Bitcoin provides, especially if you use Bitcoin with privacy best practices, provides a way for you to opt out of that system. Another aspect is OpenArms mentioned Switzerland. Part of that is because Switzerland's not part of the EU. The EU is like one of the worst places right now, I think, to operate a Bitcoin business. They just keep adding more and more regulatory overhead. It's even worse than America, it seems now. They kind of leapfrogged us. The UK
they're
is
not
also
part of the EU,
bad.
but they're part of the EU. It's like one of those
Right.
types of things. And they will have to implement a version of AML, Fifth Money Laundering Directive, AML 5D.
Yeah, so their limits are going down. Like, you could do, like, I don't know the exact numbers, but you could do in a month like 10,000 euros, last year. Now you can only do like 2,000. And, it will be going to go being squeezed down. And yes, they are part of the European economic area. So the AMLD5 and things are apply just as well as it applies to the UK. But the UK rather puts some more on top.
Indeed. Yeah.
And to add on top of that, part of my concern and part of the reason why I think it's, extra important for us to get ahead of this trend in Bitcoin is because the usage of cash is decreasing. It's decreasing mostly because our peers in our age group and the younger individuals prefer not to use it out of convenience. They prefer to use the digital alternatives. But it's also decreasing because governments are trying to reduce its usage. So in a lot of countries, already we're seeing the usage of cash just being seen as suspicious, even if it's completely allowed. Why would you use cash instead of this more convenient system where, you might get points back or some bullshit like that? So as cash usage decreases, this becomes more and more of an issue for Bitcoiners, I think, because you kind of eliminate that whole cash for Bitcoin trade system on the cash side. A lot of the issues there, originate from the fiat side of the equation. I'd also add that we have Anarchio C on Twitter who wanted to mention, he makes a very good point here, is that these KYC laws, they end up with a lot of people in the traditional system being excluded. They can't have bank accounts. They can't have digital payment apps. And as a result, if we don't have a robust circular economy where people can earn Bitcoin, those people also get excluded from the freedom benefits that Bitcoin provides, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I was going to say, like, to be positive about some stuff, but I don't want to be like seen as negative. The positive thing is KYC doesn't exist on chain, like on the blockchain itself. There's no, It exists only on the on-ramps, right? Or most of the on-ramps. So if you're able to bypass the on-ramps, the regulated on-ramps, you're able to interact with Bitcoin in a way that is liberating. And it has to, that's why we've been hammering home for a really long time, years and years, for users to figure out ways to acquire Bitcoin outside of that system, outside of that KYC system, because it opens Bitcoin up to its full potential. And that's a censorship free payment network, right? That's a censorship free form of value. And that's what I got involved for. It's become a lot more difficult, as you mentioned, though. Anyone who's been involved in for a while has seen the dramatic shift in the cash for the cash trade ecosystem.
Another aspect here that's important to mention, I think, is that mining remains one of the best ways to obtain KYC-free Bitcoin. Next week, I will have Diverter, Econa Alchemist on again. They'll both be return guests. They weren't on the same episode last time. And also Ronan Miner, who I just noticed Neil joined us in the live chat. They will all be joining us for a special Citadel Dispatch next week to discuss no KYC mining. And that will be also at a non-standard time. That'll be on Tuesday at noon Eastern. So that's 1600 UTC. So just pay attention, freaks, for that episode coming up next. I'm also really looking forward to that conversation.
Matt, can I jump in based on the chat comment here?
Yes, read the comment first.
It just went off my screen, but it's from I think Winston Hex. It's the second comment he made, and it's the gist of it is equating wanting to avoid the KYC system to wanting to evade taxes. And I would just like to point out to this gentleman that the KYC system was put into place, has nothing to do with tax evasion or taxes. It was put into place after the 2001 terrorist attack, as a way to make sure that money laundering couldn't be used to finance another terrorist operation. So it has nothing to do with taxes. And to equate the two things is just really statist thinking. The point of avoiding the KYC system is because we have a fundamental right to transact freely, and you cannot transact freely through the KYC system. And Bitcoin was created in a way where you can opt out of that system. And all we're doing is preaching to people that if they're looking for a way to opt out of that system, there exists a solution, and that's Bitcoin.
So what I really like about Dispatch is that, we have a lot of very dedicated Bitcoiners that believe in the mission, and they tend to just consume as much Bitcoin content as possible, use as many tools as possible, constantly educate themselves, constantly continue their learning. And as a result, what they do is, I've learned from operating the Bitcoin education space for such a long time, that the easiest way for us to scale this thing and increase, usage of Bitcoin privacy best practices is to have a group of ride or dies that go out and then help their, 10 or 15 people that look at them as the Bitcoin guy or girl, to provide, a solid base to those people that look to them for advice. So I would say that there's not a lot. I would hope that there's not a lot of this audience who doesn't know, who doesn't think privacy is important. I'd be surprised that they're still listening 30 episodes in. But I'm curious, Samurai, to the majority of Bitcoiners. I would say like 90% of Bitcoiners who are not currently trying to use the tools, their main issue or the main roadblock is that they don't see the value in privacy to begin with. So just to pull this conversation back a little bit, I'm curious if you could say to them, why they should care in the first place, why privacy matters in general, not just in Bitcoin land. I'd be really interested on how you would phrase that.
Well, yeah, I mean, they may not think that they value privacy, but of course they value privacy. They have curtains on their windows. They have doors. They put they probably don't send letters, but if they did, they would put it in an envelope so anyone but the intended party could read it. People have a natural desire for privacy. And what the Bitcoin tools that are available today, the ones especially that you mentioned in your intro, what they all attempt to do is just replicate the same type of privacy that has existed in the cash system for thousands of years. And I don't think that's revolutionary or radical. And if they don't value, privacy besides that, I don't try to convince them. I just think, maybe they're just they haven't had that moment yet where, something happens in their life that they start to value their privacy, or maybe they're just too far gone and they're not the people that we need to be talking to.
I tend to think for most people, they won't really get it until they get burned. Would you agree? Like till that aha moment happens where they touch the stove and they realize, fuck, this shit is actually
I think
important.
a lot of people. Yeah. I think a lot of people are like that.
And I think as we enter this more digital world where more and more of our life goes online, we're going to see more breaches, privacy breaches and data breaches that expose us publicly to the world, our intimate secrets and our intimate lifestyle choices, and just all matters of things that we do in our day-to-day lives. So it kind of sounds bearish short term in terms of privacy, but I think my bullish take on people, the world caring about privacy, is that so many people are going to get burned over the next 10 years, not just in Bitcoin land, that they're going to be forced into realizing the need for it, and then they'll seek out the tools. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think you have to, for a lot of people, or a majority of people, that they're going to need to have some sort of event happen to them, right? They're going to need to get burnt in some way. But I mean, for others, I think that, the events of 2020 and 2021 with COVID and with the really strong government response pretty much everywhere, has really kind of opened up a lot of people who maybe weren't thinking about this previously, to thinking that maybe it's time they started taking their privacy seriously, because things can change very quickly, and laws can be reworked very quickly. So, maybe more of those types of events will bring more and more people who care about that type of thing.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with that.
Actually, one other point to that is, I mean, if governments start to get or crack down and get more repressive, especially around transactional freedom, so i.e. cutting off funding to groups that are, or even just individual content creators through deplatforming on YouTube, who are, spreading the wrong message. Those types of events, if these continue to happen, create a whole class of user that hopefully would be able to use Bitcoin to route around that type of event, like in the way that WikiLeaks first famously used Bitcoin as the first major economic participant, when they got their Visa and MasterCard donations canceled. So you want to have the privacy tech, and you want to have the tools available for that, potential or, inevitability.
Yeah, I mean, I think the plan should be to have the tools ready, have the education ready, have the resources ready, and when the masses realize the need, they'll be there for them, right?
Yeah.
Open arms.
Yeah.
Any thoughts here before we dive in deeper?
I mean, it's never enough to talk about this. We always do on Dispatch, and I love that. I think people, I agree that you either have something happen to you, or you come from an environment which is like, has been exposed to problems connected with like authoritarianism or surveillance, or like just extortions and taking property away, which was belonging to people without any way to kind of save it. I myself from the eastern part of Europe and then moved to the very kind of comfortable Western society where people are really just like the boiling frogs, who are now about to kind of, it will be time to jump out, but they won't. And that's, it's just need to open eyes to these things. But I think there will be the real adoption. I mean, not in terms of how many millions of dollars come in, but in terms of how many users come in, will happen on the places which need Bitcoin and these technologies as well. And then, now we are at a level where people have we will have tools to have for them available if they are ready to just search for it. You don't even need to learn much, right? You don't need to program anymore to construct a coin join, right? And that is a good thing. And we need to continue to improve and make it more easy and more accessible for these people to be available. And then everyone else who doesn't want to boil could jump out of the water.
Yeah, I agree.
So with all that said, the show is focused on actionable Bitcoin discussion, things that Bitcoiners today can do to better themselves. So we so far we've said earning Bitcoin, mining Bitcoin. I guess mining is earning. It kind of falls into the same subset. Circular economy, just realizing the need in general. But then we also have what you guys have been working on over at Samurai Wallet, which is it's going to be funny, this whole conversation, I think, because your NIM is both Samurai Wallet and the project is also Samurai Wallet. But let's dive into what your strategy is over at Samurai and how you guys are approaching this for everyday Bitcoiners.
So, can you repeat the question there, Matt? I kind of lost you for a bit.
Basically, like, what is your strategy over at Samurai Wallet? Like, how are you guys approaching this issue? How are you, trying to provide a tool set that is useful for Bitcoiners today?
Right. So I guess one of the most important points about what a user can do, other than avoid the KYC system, because as you said, most are going to be either they didn't hear this message early enough, or there's just no other way for them, and they can't produce or earn for whatever reason. The tools that we've created, one of the benefits of those tools for KYC UTXOs is that the forward-looking activity of those UTXOs, once they go through the tools that we create, specifically Whirlpool, can't be connected to the KYC UTXOs of the past. So it's a way of breaking the KYC record on chain anyway, for users who have those UTXOs. Now the KYC record will still remain, of course, with the entity where you acquired the coins from, but the link with your KYC information to your on-chain UTXO information will be severed. And I think that's the fundamental tool that we provide in Whirlpool. And every other tool that we provide is essentially building on that idea. And we can get into the weeds if you want, but that's the gist of our tool, and generally all privacy tools and all the CoinJoin tools specifically. The point of CoinJoin is what? To turn deterministic links into probabilistic links. So that's exactly what we do.
So you made an interesting point there, and I've kind of been, thrown over the coals over it sometimes. Privacy-focused people have a lot of passion, and that's one of the reasons I love operating in the space. But you would agree that if you are going to KYC, going into CoinJoin afterwards, using Whirlpool afterwards, is strictly the best option to do if you are KYC'd.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, I would extend it to all UTXOs, whether they're KYC'd or not. I think they should go through a round of equal output CoinJoin. And it should be done, relatively frequently. So yeah, I agree completely. If you've gone through that process of KYC, you need to sever the on-chain footprint between your KYC record, which links real life, with the blockchain. The KYC record will still exist. Your tax record will still exist. The exchange will still have all the information that they had prior to the Whirlpool, but on-chain, which is where we're concerned, will be good.
Yeah, that's also an interesting point that you mentioned there, because a lot of people that like coming through BISC or something say like, I don't see why I have the need for using these CoinJoin tools if I'm buying without KYC to begin with. But even if you're a vendor and you're receiving Bitcoin from a customer, you're receiving Bitcoin from someone. Someone knows that you're the one who got it, and you want to break that link regardless, right?
Exactly.
Can I just say that when we are focusing on the importance of avoiding KYC first of all, and then once you get into it, try to get rid of the trail, so not to have your payments tied to your identity. But then privacy is much bigger than that. Even if you are not, we would not have this kind of we wouldn't need to show our passports anywhere. Then you still, because of the qualities of the Bitcoin blockchain, having every address to and from and the amount public, you need to be able to hide from if you buy something, you don't want the seller to know what your stash is, what is all your money is, because he would, next time at least, he would ask for a higher price then. Or you don't want someone to know what is your monthly wage if you are being paid in Bitcoin. That is, if I understand correctly, that is the backwards looking privacy which can be provided by CoinJoins. And then the forward looking one is that your employer, you don't want your employer to know exactly when and what and how much did you buy. And either the employer or wherever you have your Bitcoin from, that could be the person you bought from, also shouldn't know about what you're doing. This is very basic. If it would be the case in the normal banking system, then we cannot imagine that. But people are not really aware of the case that this is the default in Bitcoin if you are not using CoinJoin or Lightning or swaps or other kind of tools. That everyone knows everything. They just need to look, and it's there for eternity.
Yeah, you don't want your boss to know your spending habits. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, exactly. And you don't want to have the corner shop know you're earning either.
Exactly. Very well said. So let's dive into. I'm trying to think where we should go next. So one of the things you mentioned there, Samurai, is this idea that like the baseline should be these CoinJoins. Like almost like we should just. I've kind of come to the conclusion that almost everything we do in Bitcoin is a post-mix activity.
Definitely, I've come to the same conclusion.
So what we really want to see is all major Bitcoin wallets standardize that activity and basically not only make every spend a CoinJoin, but also make every spend a post-mix out of a proper non-deterministic CoinJoin rounds, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think that if you don't want to go as far as to say that there needs to be standardization between the protocols, right? Then we can at least say that there needs to be certain attributes of the protocols that are demanded by users of the protocols, which are no deterministic links, right? Each mixed transaction has to be all probabilistic, not deterministic in any way, and various other qualities. And I think that if those standards could be met on the actual mixing protocol side, then you know that would be phenomenal for users. And then on the post mix side, as you suggest, Matt, it's almost as important, because if you combine your post mix with any other UTXOs associated to other activity, you will be linking their histories together. And you don't want to do that. So it's really important for the wallet to implement a post-mix strategy properly. Now, the attempts at standardization were made, way back in 2016, I believe, with Nopar from what would become Wasabi, and TDevD was involved, and various other contributors, some from the Open Bitcoin Privacy Project. They would create the zero link spec, and zero link spec specifies all of these conditions of post mix, account segregation, the structured liquidity. All of these are defined in the zero link specification, and we believe that to be a good specification, and that's what Whirlpool is built on. And we think it ticks all the boxes, and it's been churning away now for a few years, and every transaction has had 100% entropy, no deterministic links, and a solid foundation to build on.
Sorry, I thought Open Arms was about to jump in there. So I mean, one of the things when we talk about Bitcoin privacy is when you track Bitcoin, right? It's a probability game. Basically, external actors are looking at the chain. Maybe they're combining KYC info, other information they have. A lot of times we suspect that these chain surveillance companies are also running nodes to do active surveillance. They're mixing it with KYC information. But there's also certain spending methods. A perfect example is if you spend, people like sending round amounts. So if you send 25 million sats, you send 0.25 Bitcoin, and then there's a random amount that's 8 digits long as the other output. You can pretty much assume that the round amount is the actual send, and the other one is the change. Another heuristic that a lot of people see is if you spend the full UTXO without change. So if you spend the full UTXO without change, a lot of times it'll be assumed. But of course, it's probability, but it'll be assumed that you're sending to yourself, because in what situation, in very rare situations, the amount you want to spend is exactly the same amount as your UTXO. Another common heuristic is the common input ownership heuristic, which is that all inputs belong to the same sender, same person. So it links those transactions on chain. So when we're talking about Bitcoin privacy on chain, we're talking about reducing the probabilities of being able to basically guess or estimate, when Bitcoin changes hands and how those transactions are happening, looking at those transactions on chain. So one of the main aspects of that is that it becomes very much a numbers game, right? You need where you're only high, your privacy is only as good as the crowd that you're among. So not only do we need to get private Bitcoin usage up so that there's more people that are actively doing it in the ecosystem, because you could be super focused on Bitcoin privacy, but if someone pays you with a KYC transaction, then you might not even realize that they paid you with a KYC UTXO. So not only do we want to get usage up, but also we have this aspect that because we have these multiple tools, you have separate, distinct basically liquidity pools among the different implementations, right? So there's always been a push, or at least a hope, that we could have, at least some kind of standard. So at least, whatever the subset of Bitcoin users are that are trying to practice Bitcoin best practices in terms of privacy, are together in that, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's important to have a variety of tools that are specialized for the situations that you find yourselves in, whether it's a post mix spend or it's getting into a equal output coin join, or if it's doing a swap or whatever the case may be. But as you mentioned, Matt, just a few moments ago, I think that it all has to stem from the postmix account. So you have to go from, a unmixed account, a deposit account, an account zero, however you call it, to a post-mix account, segregated and separate. And that post-mix account may have different rules, spending rules that are in place there. And then from there, all of these other options open up that work cohesively together, and actually are solving problems that users are facing, whether that be just a general undermining of a heuristic that you mentioned, or actually evading a overzealous exchange, for example, who's known to blacklist UTXOs.
So, I think let's jump in deep into how you guys have set up Whirlpool, from the entry into Whirlpool to the post-mix tools. How does that all come together into one a package that is becoming more and more cohesive every day with your new updates?
Yeah, sure. So, I guess the best way to start is to just reiterate that Whirlpool isn't an external service. It's a part of your wallet. It's an area of your wallet, and it's a protocol that allows for communication between various collaborators of transactions using a centralized coordinator that we run. The centralized coordinator is blinded, however, so it can't read the message it's passing, but it is passing messages. So the start a user would go through is what a process called the TX0. This is where they take their unmixed source coins that they want to mix. They want to end up with mixed coins. They take these source coins from their external account and they send them to an address, and they're automatically split into like amount types based on the pool you choose. And there's various denomination pools ranging from 0.5 BTC to 0.01 BTC. So it creates these like amount denominations. This is why it's called equal output coin join, because all the outputs are equal in the transaction, and queues them for what we call a mixing cycle or a cycle. Each cycle has certain rules to it, and this is what we term as structured liquidity, meaning that you're going to be each one of these UTXOs that you have that, let's say, are 0.5 BTC, are going to be mixed individually with other participants. They're not going to be mixed together in the same transaction. Likewise, no other participant in that transaction is going to be have been seen together in a previous transaction as well. So every transaction, every UTXO that in there is fresh and never seen together before. This is an important aspect of Whirlpool that is not shared by, I don't think, any of the other implementations, and it's an important aspect to creating the highest entropy Bitcoin transactions that you can create. From there, once a mix has been achieved. Let me rewind a bit. The downside of structured liquidity, I should bring in, is that it could be slower because of the strict rules that stop mixes from triggering if these conditions haven't been met. you need constant fresh liquidity coming into the mixing pools. And that can produce ebb and flow type patterns where sometimes it's very inactive. There's not a lot of liquidity coming in, and sometimes there's a huge amount coming in. But we feel it's worthwhile for the privacy benefits.
So let me just jump in real quick before we continue. With CoinJoin tools, the main threat to a CoinJoin user is something called a Sybil attack, and it's when an external attacker is coming in and they're flooding the CoinJoin rounds with their own transactions, and then through process of elimination, they're able to have a higher probability of tracking your transactions, right? So one of the main aspects that all of these implementations seek to target is Sybil resistance. So this idea that if you have an honest actor, it'll cost less for that honest actor than it will for a Sybil attacker, an actual a monetary cost to try and attack the rounds as basically a spam prevention mechanism, the same idea that Bitcoin transaction fees in general operate under. So the goal of Whirlpool, as currently laid out, is to try and reduce that, create a situation where it becomes onerously expensive for a Sybil attacker to attack. The downside, the downside is that because it's a centralized coordinator and the main Sybil resistance is the transaction, right now transaction fees are nothing, basically nothing. The main Sybil resistance is the actual CoinJoin fee, the Whirlpool fee that is paid to you guys at Samurai. So as a result, it doesn't provide Sybil resistance against you guys, but it does provide Sybil resistance against an external attacker. With the caveat that if fees ever rise, and I actually do kind of want to have a conversation about fees, but we'll have that later, transaction fees on the network, then that would also provide some level of Sybil resistance against you guys as well, because you would still have to pay on-chain transaction fees. Did I get that correct?
Yeah, from what I heard, that was entirely correct.
Awesome. Okay, let's continue.
One thing that I can add on to that, all of our revenue that we generate in Samurai is on chain, so it can be viewed and tracked by anyone who wants to look. And we tend to not immediately put it. We do put it through Whirlpool eventually, but we don't do it immediately. It's usually 3 months, 4 months, 5 months. So if anyone wanted to, they could actually watch our addresses move into Whirlpool. So they would know exactly when Samurai is entering the pool.
That makes sense. Open Arms, anything you want to add on before we continue here?
Well, I really cannot tell more about Whirlpool than like Samurai Wallet does, right? What I would be interested to go in is like the specifics of join market, which is another. Is it correct that it's not a zero link implementation, but it is a CoinJoin implementation, quite long existing started before the actual zero link specification. And there are a couple of things which it does differently, and I'm not saying it's overall better or worse. It's just it has use cases when it's more useful, and most of the time it is more difficult to use, and gives you more freedom, which means there is more possibility to shoot yourself on the feet, but also can do things which you cannot do with like fixed pools and the way the accounts are separated in Samurai. Like just a short example. I don't want to go into every little thing, but the account separation, I think that is the most important thing you need to do, which is you are not merging your transactions, and you're not merging the outputs which are coming from the CoinJoin with the change from your inputs. So basically, you're not mixing the unmixed, not merging the unmixed change with the CoinJoin outputs, and that is very strictly done in Samurai Wallet. You have the deposit wallet, and then you have the postmix wallet, and you cannot achieve it in the GUI to spend them together. And same is done in join market by having 5 accounts which are not specifically named to be deposits, postmix, bed bank, but they are fulfilling all the roles in a rolling manner. But the separation happens during a coin joins, that when a coin join happens, the coin join output goes to a separate account and the unmixed change stays back in the same. And then through the 5 mix depth, this is happening in a circular way. So once some funds goes through 5 coin joins, they get back to the first one. And I mean, obviously there are 5 to minimize the possibility that there would be this kind of appealing chain where they would get back to the same change they were starting from. But I mean, that doesn't really make sense because it's already been through 5 coin joins. So and that kind of structure, where it's not the liquidity structure, but the coin join kind of like tumbling through. That's why we call the script which is doing this in one go through 9-10 coin joins a tumbler, because the funds kind of tumble through the mix depth. It's like a waterfall of coin joins then. And the very important other difference is that you don't need to. There are no fixed pools, which means no fixed amounts. So you can coin join any amount, which means you have a possibility to not create change in transactions. When you are depositing your funds, you can just coin join the whole thing minus the fees, and that's what you have coming out of it. There will be no exchange at all, right? And this is true for like slightly. I mean, the 100K kind of pool is kind of, is the realistic lower level where it would worth to kind of put anything in or break UTXOs up to that kind of small size. And so the communication happens all over Tor, as with Samurai Wallet, with Whirlpool as well. And there was a point I was trying to get to, which I'm sure I will make later. But I think these things are just kind of you can use both, right? And that's what I'm doing as well, because I oftentimes I like to use something which creates me a range of different kind of UTXOs, especially for like running Lightning. And also the possibility to pay with a coin join means that I'm not only able to, when I'm doing a peer-to-peer transaction, I can do that with Samurai as well, but that would be a 2-participant coin join. With Join Market, I can do 7 to 9, 15 participant coin join to the destination address, or that could be a cold storage address as well, which would make it look like it never got out of that kind of coin join liquidity pool. So it could be just go on again. But it's not that. The drawback is that it's not that kind of homogenic as the Samurai Whirlpool UTXOs are, that the same kind of size in, same size of out, and it's just going. I mean, after a couple of rounds, there is not really a big difference if you mix. I mean, to my view, if you mix 5 times, 10 times, or 100 times, you basically have a quite. I mean, that broke the chain, right? In Whirlpool. But obviously, if you're not doing that with this kind of same in, same out fashion, then you might need a bit more rounds to kind of reliably break these chains, and you won't be that easy to prove it either. So there is, you can go deep into comparing these, but yeah, useful tools. And yeah, please continue. I don't want to kind of hijack all this.
No, I think that was a great comparison. That was perfectly put, and I think Join Market is the OG. It's been around for correct me if I'm wrong, but 2015, I want to say.
15, yes, correct.
Yeah, 2015. And when we first started Samurai, which was I believe just a few months before Join Market got announced, it definitely served as something of an inspiration to try to replicate and figure out a way. I think actually our first designs were how to be a mobile Join Market interface, but back then it was so primitive that it was nearly impossible to do. It was still so early. But in any case, yeah, Join Market has a great design choices in the account segregation, as you mentioned, Openams, and that's true. It was true in 2015, and it's true today. That's probably one of the most important aspects of the CoinJoin is maintaining that separation. So it really should be in every CoinJoin implementation. It should be mandatory for the client to do that. If I was to disagree with anything, nothing in what you said, but if I was to disagree with the protocol, I would say since 2015, we've learned a lot of things about on-chain analysis. We've learned how chain analysis companies are processing the blockchain, how they're reading the blockchain, and we understand that it's about the flows of UTXOs, and it's my personal opinion that in 2020, you need to be going with equal output CoinJoins, not CoinJoin spends, because it doesn't reliably break the transaction graph. And you mentioned this with saying that you'll need to do more rounds, many more rounds, and that's true. The rounds can help you, but they can also hurt you as well because of the presence of unmixed change within the actual mixed transactions. So I mean, if I was Join Market, I would change one thing, and that would be getting rid of the unmixed change that follows along the mixed transactions, and that'd be a huge win for that protocol. And I completely agree. Use both. There's absolutely no reason why you shouldn't use both tools. Check them out.
So in you mean getting rid of the unmixed change in terms of the 5 accounts wouldn't be cyclical, so it never gets back to a previous change? Because I mean, it gets rid of it in the terms of it always separated to another account, but then yes,
but they'll be in a mixed transaction, a follow along mixed transaction possibly.
Yes, they could enter the same mixed depth once the unmixed change has been in another CoinJoin. It could enter through that CoinJoin. It could enter to the same mixed depth. It's
right, and we know that you can, and we know that you can combine both accounts in the client, in the Join Market client. That's, as we said, they segregate the unmixed change from the mixed outputs. So we know that the mixed outputs in a Join Market transaction can't be the same entity that owns the unmixed change that are a part of that transaction, right? So all my point is, and I don't want to make this a versus thing or anything like that, because that's not what we came here to do, is that this was, and it still is, a good solution. But our feeling is that the strongest CoinJoins have no deterministic links, and these unmixed change that follow along in the transaction do create certain deterministic links within the CoinJoin transaction. Now, there's plenty of probabilistic links. I mean, Join Market does work. It breaks up and adds probability to the ownership of inputs to outputs. But there's certain transactions that are UTXOs that are linked mathematically. And getting rid of all of those actual linked mathematically UTXOs from the actual mixed transaction itself is, in our opinion, needs to be the de facto, or should be the de facto. Anything after that, like, go ahead.
No, I agree, and I completely, do respect that how this kind of structure is being built in, and how clean or kind of straightforward it is. How kind of the TX0 creates these equal amounts, and then basically once they entered the Whirlpool mix, once they have been through the first one, then their amount it just doesn't change completely. So it's not even just equal output as in the joint market, but also it's equal input within that pool. So that makes it just completely kind of homogenic as I would see it. It's as you usually. When people talk about like chain analysis, chain surveillance companies looking at like Whirlpool, and if they say funds enter into that, they just forget it. There is no probabilities to look for. Whereas probably like in joint market, as you say, there could be some things to try. And I mean, yes, probabilities with it low, or yes, could be there.
Yeah,
but,
like metadata, and you would still have to work to put these things together. It's not like it's out there on a dish for you, but it's still there, and that's again. I'm not shitting on join market at all, because we have to remember join market's from 2015, and the fundamental working of join market in terms of how it breaks the chain hasn't changed since then. It's pretty much the same protocol in terms of the chain breaking. So I think that we've learned things since then, and we certainly have built on the shoulders of giants, in terms of what we've learned as a community and the privacy community.
Yes, sure. So it's the recommendation from and some protocol changes has changed since like 2015, including the that kind of hugely interesting kind of analysis, which was the analysis of transactions from 2015 regarding this grid chain case, which the kind of summary research or is it OTX research?
OXT
has made?
the grid chain
OXT,
case.
exactly. Yeah. Yes. So that was very interesting, and it was like a very good response to and discussion following that as well with like Voxing, and there was a bit of back and forth. I think to the positive. And what did they change since? What join market has changed? That there is more. I mean, in the Tumblr, so in this waterfall kind of type of coin join script, which is the most efficient way of doing it, it does include transactions from the start, the first transaction, and then a couple more, which does not create this exchange at all, but uses all UTXO. So it kind of tries to kind of prevent this problem. And then that is the same kind of recommendation when someone uses join market, which is obviously, you cannot check people to do this, but to act as like a taker, the initiator of the coin join transaction, you can do the sweep transactions when you are using the ability to coin join any amount. You just coin join all the amount available in that account, and then you are not creating any unexchanged. And again, this is not like built into the protocol. This is something which has, I mean, not in the kind of non-Tumblr protocol, but it's something which any user could do, and it's recommended to do, especially during like times where you have like one set for byte transactions and like plenty of liquidity available as well. And just one other thing I wanted to touch on, that you have this. So obviously this is the issue, right? I mean, I'm certain we will speak about this. That Whirlpool basically or tries to solve this unexchanged problem by just separating and basically disposing those funds, putting them in a not to use kind of wallet, not to use part of the wallet, which would be the exchange, and which would be tied to all the inputs which have entered Whirlpool in the TX0, and those are the things I really would like to kind of go into and hear from you what we will do about this. But that's another thing which join market gives you a bit more flexibility, that you have like 5 of these mix steps by default. I mean, you can even increase them, but this is kind of a good trade-off number. And so funds from different sources, you can also just deposit into the different accounts freely, like different new addresses in different accounts. And that what it means, that they won't like enter into a TX0 just by themselves or just like merged when they are entering the TX0, because obviously the incentive with Whirlpool is that the bigger amount you throw in there, proportionally less fees you are paying, which is great incentive, but people would tend to merge their funds from different sources, I would think. Unless, obviously being known, and then you have like being warned about this, and you have the idea of these multi-party TX0s and things which are coming. I'm sure that's the thing as well. But Join Market gives this option to kind of from the start separate. So inside one wallet, you have 5 accounts, and just separate your different sources to different accounts. And that's just another unique thing which it can do. And please go on, on the comments, and what are you?
If I could just jump in, jump in real quick here. Everything has trade-offs, right? And Join Market and Whirlpool have a lot of similarities, but they're also very different. And they've selected very different trade-off balances. The main one being that Join Market doesn't rely on a centralized coordinator, while Samurai Whirlpool does. So you do have that issue where you don't have Sybil resistance against the coordinator itself. You also have the issue that I think when Join Market was initially conceived, was this idea that maybe like no company could actually, in the upcoming regulatory environment, run an own coordinator, run a centralized coordinator. Fortunately, that hasn't been the case yet, but it could be in the future. And then you have, as we were talking earlier, is the main threat vector that these implementations should be solving for is this idea of Sybil resistance against an external attacker. And Join Market accomplishes this by, it has a maker-taker system where people post liquidity as makers, and they receive a fee for providing that maker liquidity. And the taker constructs the transaction. So the taker is basically the coordinator in the transaction. And so the way that Sybil resistance is attempted to be achieved there is by going through multiple makers, because the worry has always been that a maker could be chain surveillance companies, that chain surveillance companies can be running many makers. And the other thing that has been added recently, or is about to be added, is this idea of fidelity bonds, right? Where the makers have to, if you're an honest maker, it'll cost you less than if you're a Sybil attacker maker, where you have to run basically multiple makers. So you're going to end up locking up more Bitcoin, right?
Basically, you create a wallet where you like provably time lock some funds. Let it be a month or even up to a couple of years, and exponentially to the amount of deposited funds times the time, you will have a higher chance to be chosen by the takers, because the takers would have an incentive, and that will be in the kind of protocol change as well, that the takers will have the incentive to choose people who have deposited more and more funds. And you have if you time lock, not just deposit, because that's outside of what you're offering for coin joining. If you deposit 5 times more funds, then you will have 25 times more chance to get to be chosen, and this will make it kind of exponentially more expensive to kind of just run multiple accounts, where it would worth it much more to just run one account with your funds. So this kind of sibling would be, it would need to lock a lot more funds to be a significant part of the order book. So that's the idea. It's coming with the next release. It's being heavily tested now, and it's just about to kind of being merged and coming with the next major release, the Fidelity bonds. So it's anyone wants to have a look or test it, this is a very good time to do it, because there is like a lively discussion and still a kind of in a flux, but almost ready.
Right, and then so on the Whirlpool side, the centralized coordinator allows for, first of all, a chain surveillance company is going to have to pay their Whirlpool fees if they want to try and Sybil the mixes. They're able to add this additional Sybil resistance that you can't do in a non-centralized fashion. It allows for a structured liquidity pool where you have these equal output coin joins that are designed to be as non-deterministic as possible, and you have a.
To be
I feel
entirely
like
non-deterministic. They are
right.
non-deterministic.
Well, I mean, yeah, I guess they're non-deterministic without any external data.
Correct. They're on chain.
But there's external data everywhere. But yeah, I agree on that. Thank you for the correction. And then the also the advantage I would say of a centralized coordinator, which is kind of a nuanced advantage, is that you end up with a better user experience. I feel like it not only does it reward the service provider that's providing the centralized coordination with fees, which goes towards improving the project, but it provides the communication mechanism because you're going to a centralized server via Tor, but you're going to a centralized server is a smoother communication system rather than going through like the modified IRC communication that Join Market uses.
Oh yeah, of course. It's like any service, right? A centralized service is generally going to offer a better experience than a non-centralized service. The difference with Whirlpool is there's nothing mission critical about what the centralized service is doing. So it's not taking custody, it's not taking private keys, it's not reading messages. It's just a message passer. It's essentially the same coordination that Join Market or Wasabi or anything uses. It's just a Join Market is non-custodial. Oh, sorry, it's a decentralized because it routes via the modified IRC, which is itself a decentralized network.
Yeah, but it also comes with rate limiting, which is
of course that has its own trade-offs. and yes. But honestly, it's amazing how far Join Market has progressed over the years using IRC to coordinate. It's very cool. It was a cool idea, and its deployment is very nice to see. We actually think that Join Market could make very good use of Soroban for coordination, especially in a federated type of model that we're kind of considering. But that's besides the point. And one clarification I think needs to be made, Matt, and that is that it's not our primary objective to stop Sybil attacks. That's it's kind of a fundamental. It's a given. The coordinator needs to make sure that they're not being Sybil attacked, because the fundamental objective is to make sure the user is obtaining the best possible mix they can achieve, and preventing Sybil attacks falls under that umbrella. But the way you described it is correct. Yes. They would have to pay the coordinator fee to us, and that is a method of Sybil resistance. The second issue is the concept of structured liquidity, meaning that a chain analysis UTXO will only be able to poison one mix at a time, and that's counter to their objectives there. And any kind of modified clients or any kind of notice that a UTXO might be connected to another UTXO that's coming in to the pool on a different client, the coordinator will keep note of that. We'll keep an eye out on that and automatically blacklist those UTXOs. So we take our job as coordinator very, very seriously in creating an environment that is going to create the best possible mixes for our users, because fundamentally what matters at the end of the day is the tracks you leave behind on chain, and we need our mixes on chain to be as strong as possible.
Yeah, so you can say the Sybil resistance is like the question of like preventing the real-time ongoing surveillance, right? But what remains forever is the track on the chain, which can be looked back at any time,
Absolutely.
even 5 years later, to try to track back some events.
It's the difference between an active attacker versus a passive attacker that might come in 2 years or 3 years or something like that.
Yeah, well, I mean, real time trying to kind of cheat the system is much more expensive and much more kind of much more energy requirement is needed for that, much more work than just spinning up an algorithm later on, which they are getting better and better, and they will be able to go deeper and deeper into the connections, and then they might find out even more than what they do now later on the chain. So yeah, the mixed quality is obviously it's a hugely important aspect, and that is something you might consider paying more as well. Yeah,
just to roll back just a few conversation point ago, open noms, I forgot to respond to you. I'm happy to hear that the OXT report on grid chain was useful for the community, and that those changes were made. I wasn't aware that those changes had been made, and I think that's a perfect example of how those research reports are supposed to be used, to improve the privacy prospect for the users, for the developers of the protocol, not to take it with blind faith, but to explore the findings for themselves and see what they find, and if they need to create a change or a fix or whatever. So I'm happy to hear that, and I'm happy to hear that OXT research was useful in that.
Oh, I mean, the discussion was hugely useful, and it was fantastic. I think it pointed out this toxic recall attack was it's pointed out something which people weren't aware of before, so it was kind of a concept which was not known. But just to be clear, the changes within the Tumblr protocol and exactly that was introduced like in 2016. So it was shortly after the transactions which have been it was introduced after the transactions which have been analyzed mostly.
I understand.
Okay. In the research. But then there is on Workswing's blog, there is like a good couple of pages response, not as detailed as the research, but trying to make it in points. And there is like a good recommendation of usage, which includes the recommendation to do this kind of thing, which is to alternate the taker and the maker roles. So initiate some coin joins and avoid the unmixed changing with sweeping UTXOs and mixed depths occasionally.
Got it.
So, I mean, I guess like we found ourselves talking CoinJoin implementations here and the trade-offs of the different CoinJoin implementations. I mean, I guess it would only make sense to jump into Wasabi for a little bit, since it is probably partially because of my doing as a major Wasabi promoter that has since retracted my endorsement of the tool. I personally think it's a waste of money and is dangerous to users. Should we jump into the concerns about using Wasabi and what Join Market and Whirlpool, how they differ from Wasabi in that regard?
Yeah, sure. I mean, in the same way that we published a OXT report on Join Market and the grid chain case, we published about 3 OXT reports on Wasabi, and in great detail. And the conclusion that we've come to is the same as you, that it's not safe for users to use to obtain any reasonable amount of privacy. They're fundamentally and architecturally flawed, and I think they know it, though they won't admit it. And they're hoping to fix the issues in their second version, to be determined when that is released. As to what the flaws are in particular, I'm not going to go into great great detail because everything is freely available. We made everything and published everything reproducibly, so users can check it out for themselves. But the major issues again fundamentally are, well, I guess you have to start at the most basic level, is that there's rampant address reuse on both on the systemic level within the Wasabi client, not a modified client, the Wasabi client. It still to this day occurs. They don't explain why. You get address reuse on both sides of the same mixed transaction. You'll see one address on the input side and the same exact address on the output side. That's absolutely not normal for anything, but let alone a coin join transaction. To bigger issues like, again, unmixed change following you around, creating this peeling chain. Again, not a serious issue by itself, as we were discussing earlier, but a piece of metadata that is used to further undermine the quality of these mixes with all the other issues, at play in the Wasabi client. Gosh, where else?
Well, if I could just jump in here real quick. First of all, one of the, not only does it end up in a poor quality mix if you have reused addresses with Wasabi, but it also means that the user is paying more, because the Wasabi fee structure, whilst the Wasabi implementation, the most similar aspect it has to Whirlpool is that it relies on a centralized coordinator that's blinded, that runs through Tor. The fee structure is completely different. So with the fee structure of Wasabi, you're literally paying for the amount of perceived other users that are in your mix, the amount of other UTXOs that are in your mix with you, and it scales based on that. So if you have users that are reusing addresses, you're not getting any benefit from them participating in the mix, but you are paying Wasabi for them being part of it. And one of the main benefits of a centralized coordinator is that you do get benefit of them enforcing structured liquidity. So one of the reasons why you'd want to use a centralized coordinator over something like Join Market is that they prevent something like that from happening. It is, even though it's blinded, it can completely stop reused addresses from happening. But they haven't implemented anything in that regard. And it's curious because they do get paid more in that result. I think an interesting case for us to talk about, and I have a screenshot of it on the screen for anyone watching the video, was the Twitter hacker, which everyone, news these days, it just goes in one ear out the other. Everyone forgets about the Twitter hacker when they got access to the God mode at Twitter and was compromising all the different major accounts. I think he even tweeted from Biden's account before Biden was president. So he used Wasabi, and what's interesting here is a lot of talk devolves into user error with Wasabi. This idea that you shouldn't you shouldn't obviously combine your unmixed change with your mixed UTXOs after they go through the mixing process. But in the case of the Wasabi hack, the case of the Twitter hacker who used Wasabi, he didn't actually combine his unmixed change with his post mix. What he did was, because he didn't remix, and correct me if I'm wrong, and that's what this shows here on the screen, is because he didn't remix and the unmixed change went through as a peeling chain and went through with the mix. You could do basic math with the unmixed change and his consolidated post mix. What he did was he consolidated his post mix transactions, but he didn't consolidate it with the unmixed change. But if you just did the math, you saw his input go in, and you did the math, and with high probability, those consolidated mix outputs are his, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I did this graphic if I remember correctly, and your explanation is spot on. This is like I said, this is the metadata, right, that follows along the transaction. So that unmixed change 2.159 shouldn't be there, shouldn't be in a mixed transaction. So this has nothing to do with the user. This isn't user error. And, you know, in Whirlpool, we don't allow for more than one UTXO to be in a single mix. So this guy had 3 UTXOs here, at least, in this mix. That wouldn't happen with Whirlpool, right? He would have 1 UTXO in each individual mix. Now, he would, if he still consolidated them in a post-mix spend, you know, there's a risk that you could, you know, analyze that post-mix spend and have some degree of certainty that maybe it came from this initial deposit, but not as much as you have here. So, you know, a little bit does come down to the user and their post-mix activity. But in the case that we're looking at right here, the user couldn't have done anything different. They just used the protocol as it was designed.
Yeah, and from my usage of Wasabi, it does warn you if you consolidate, if you try and mix the unmixed change, if you try and combine the unmixed change with your post mix, but it doesn't warn you if you consolidate post mix together, I believe. Just
and a level of consolidation needs to be assumed that, you know, a user is, you know, is at some point going to have to consolidate some UTXOs in post mix together to make a spend. Now, in a good mix, that shouldn't necessarily matter too much, right? If you're only doing a small amount, a subset of your total amount that you've put in, there's not going to be an amount correlation analysis done there. If you're putting in, like, you know, 500 BTC and taking out 500 BTC a couple days later, you know, an analyst is going to look at that and go, well, I can't say for certain, but I'm pretty sure that's the guy, right? And they're going to keep an eye on it and wait for more clues. You know, so if you're, but you know, a small amount of consolidation shouldn't harm you if the mix quality is good.
So I mean, part of this comes into play with the Whirlpool implementation is this idea that, first of all, something we talk about a lot in this space is incentives. And Whirlpool incentivizes remixing because you only pay when you enter the liquidity pool. You don't pay for subsequent mixes. With Wasabi, you pay for every remix. So, and the default is just one mix, basically. The default is an onset of 50. So if you do one round of 50 or more UTXOs, it's just going to default to a single round. So you have a couple things there. You have defaults, you have incentives, and then the third thing is this idea of post-mix tools. And by default with Whirlpool, which I think is really cool, is that when you make a transaction out of the post-mix, you know, especially a consolidation transaction, it will default to something you guys call Stonewall, which is an imitation 2 or more person coin join. This idea that on chain it looks like a 2-person coin join, and that is that only works as a deception because in the wallet you also have the option of doing something you call Stonewall 2x as opposed to just regular Stonewall, and that's when you actually do a person-to-person coin join as a spend, and that is done without the centralized coordinator. So correct me if I'm wrong, part of the idea is this main trade-off that we have with the centralized coordinator, where there's no real Sybil resistance against the centralized coordinator, is mitigated because this idea that after you do the post mix, you're able to then do a coin join easily without the coordinator. And even if you don't do a coin join, the coordinator doesn't know if you did a coin join or not because it looks on chain like it was a coin join, right?
Yep. Yeah, you explained it perfectly. It's identical to, so you have a Stonewall and you have a Stonewall X2 or times 2. And that's exactly what it means. It's a Stonewall with an additional participant that looks exactly like a Stonewall, and you can't distinguish it on chain or not. And it's a broader concept of that once mixing has been achieved and the user is in a, you know, it's never finished. The user is in a constant state of remixing for as long as those UTXOs are in the Samurai wallet. Those UTXOs are available for remixing. When it comes time for the inevitable event where the user needs to spend, whether that's to a merchant or to cold storage or to whatever, our theory is that there needs to be a variety of different tools, which we call post-mix spend tools. And these tools will solve different problems. One problem being consolidating too many UTXOs to make a send to an external third party, not yourself, and that's what Stonewall X2 aims to help. There's still a level of consolidation happening, but there's what's termed as entropy associated with that transaction, meaning the number of combinations of inputs to outputs are dramatically more than a normal quote unquote simple Bitcoin transaction. But that's just one of the tools we have. The other tool we have, of course, is Stowaway, and this is useful when you're sending to someone, one, who has Samurai, so it's a limited pool already, but two, when you want to send to that person and you want that person to be involved as a participant in the transaction. The biggest benefit of this is it looks like a simple transaction on the blockchain, and the amount that's been transacted isn't visible on the blockchain. And of course, Join Market users will be familiar with this functionality because I believe it's in the Join Market wallet as PayJoin.
Yeah, PayJoin, P2EP. Yeah,
and pay to endpoint. Yeah. So it's a different implementation, but it's very, very similar functionality.
Yeah, yes. Yes. I mean, in Join Market, it is like so it has multiple implementations, compatible implementations, including BTC Pay, which is like the biggest kind of thing which the actual merchants use, and obviously donations, and lots of sites can use BTC Pay, and which supports PayJoin. Obviously, it needs to run a hot wallet on a server, so there is a bit of a disincentive there. And I think there are some mobile wallets which have implemented it, like there is like a table on Bitcoin Wiki, which is, I think, Blue Wallet, and maybe the Green Wallet does it as well, but or what they're just planning. But yes. I mean, post-mix tools are just like the tools so like in Join Market, there's no strict separation between CoinJoin tools and post-mix tools, except PayJoin, obviously, that is only when you're sending to someone. But the fact that you are able to pay with the CoinJoin, finding peers in that encrypted IRC chat with your bot gives you the ability to kind of go off to cold storage, and that's something I'd like to. What I'd really like to ask you, would like to hear more about it. What's your kind of long-term vision of how do you imagine that people will, if it picks up? I mean, if the privacy kind of tools usage would pick up, and then we would really see every transaction as a CoinJoin. Do you think that is really possible, or do you think it is, or are you working for the current kind of environment, serving your users you have at the moment, and making the best out of the circumstances, and it might be very much different in like 5 years?
That's a good question. I think that when I say make every spend a CoinJoin, I'm talking to our users, and I'm talking to the people who want to use Bitcoin and want to use it privately for whatever reason. And there's a multitude of reasons. I'm not necessarily talking to the mass market. Even if I believe that all spends should be a CoinJoin, then we have the tools to make quote unquote all spends a CoinJoin. I know that that's not going to be the case. But I also know that a lot of transactions are Whirlpool transactions currently on chain. So I think that there is a demand from users, and our users are they grow all the time, month over month in terms of user base. And it costs them BTC to do this, right? Like that's a very clear indicator that we're doing something right there, and they want what we're providing there. So we're bullish in that regard. We're definitely bullish in that regard, because that really is, paying, like showing, like voting with your wallet, right? Yeah. So no, not everyone, but whoever needs to hear it. That's basically who.
Right. What I love the most about using multiple tools is that one thing is the selection of different sizes of UTXOs. Having multiple pools is already a great start. Just 0.1 Bitcoin is not good. That's just it is good like when the price was like 3,000 or like even like in between that, but now what is 0.1 Bitcoin is like $3,000. What do I do with that? It's not useful for too many kind of applications. So like having multiple 100,000, 1 million, 5 billion, and 50 million is very useful. But I love to have like a selection of these. And then also what I really, because my kind of view of how spending would be, and at the same time we are looking at this mempool chart, which is like it is a ghost town. There are like multiple non-full blocks coming up in the previous blocks. So in this case, I would like to have every spend as a coin join, but and every transaction as a coin join, but not when the fees are in the multiple hundreds cents per byte, and then the activity does visibly fall down as well as in Whirlpool, as well as in Join Market. It's perceivable that you don't have that many transactions a day. So then it comes the time of these scaling tools, which is like the main is Lightning. And also you can do swaps into Lightning, which do break the chain to a good extent as well. And what my vision is, or how I like to feel it most efficient to use Bitcoin, is have these private UTXOs and just fund a Lightning channel with them. And then basically that is a best transaction from which I can fairly comfortably can spend, because it is spending with Lightning is quite private. It has this aspect of the ongoing surveillance. It can be done, but quite unlikely, and it's even less than the problem with CB resistance and coinjoins and things. So especially if you have like just one channel, there is no way of probing that. If there are no like payments are going through the node. So what you're doing when you're opening a Lightning channel is basically batching all those transactions which you have done on Lightning to those two transactions which is opening or closing, and then you can make the UTXO basically completely disappear on this second layer when you spend all of it on Lightning, and when you close the channel there is no change. If there is change, then the change would belong into CoinJoin again, and not should not be merged together with like especially transactions on that node or with other kinds of funds. So that's what I see, and to be the best way. And I'm not expecting Samurai Wallet to be able to, or not to be able to work on implementing Lightning, because it's just crazy. Like let's see what like Electrum Wallet did. They worked on it for like a year or more, and completely disregarding any other thing, and they got an implementation which is, I'm sure it's very exciting as a programmer and the developer, but I don't know anyone who actually uses like Lightning and Electrum, right? Because it's nowhere near as good as the dedicated Lightning implementation. So it's not the best to kind of suddenly change your mind and just divide all the resources you have to move to work on something else, even if you would think it's useful. But I know your position might be a bit different. But what I like to do is to have the freedom to be able to kind of sign transactions, which then got to be Lightning channels. So at the moment in Samurai Wallet, you can do sign like raw transactions, which can be like it's going through a couple of hoops, can be generated with like Electrum or like even Spectre, or like involving Sentinel and things like that, a bit in a clunky way. But are you planning to like fully support the kind of PSBT format, which can be then make it more flexible, and you don't need to support Lightning to be able to send the postmix UTXOs straight to a Lightning channel?
Oh yeah, definitely. PSBT support is largely implemented in Samurai. It's just not hooked up to any of the to any UI or anything like that currently. But yeah, we have plans for full PSBT support. We supported it when it was first proposed and started implementing it then. We're just a little delayed because it needs to be implemented on the Sentinel side of things as well, and a proper UI needs to be created because, as you stated, there's quite a few hoops and it's a little clunky right now. But yes, so a user will definitely be able to process and create PSBTs.
That's great. I mean, I think if I could jump in here real quick, I mean, I think we all agree that Lightning is a post-mix tool, just to go back to our earlier conversation.
Yeah, 100%.
Like everything else, it's a post-mix tool. The Open Arms in the beginning also made an interesting point about, he didn't say it specifically, but he was referring to the fact that Wasabi has this single equal output pool size, which is 0.1 Bitcoin, 10 million sats, which is $3,500. So basically, you're saying to users, you have to have $3,500 in order to use this privacy tool, which to me is like an incredible non-starter if you're trying to increase usage. And with these equal output coin joins, whether it's Wasabi or Whirlpool, you have this issue where you have this equal output, and anything that's left over is this idea of toxic change, right? And Whirlpool has attempted to mitigate this fact by adding multiple pool sizes. So what we see with a lot of users is they might go into the largest pool size, they go into the 50 million sat pool size, and then they take their change and then they go into the next pool size, the 5 million sat pool size, and then they go into the 1 million sat pool size, and then they take their remaining change and they go into the 100,000 sat pool size. And they're left over with UTXOs, a bunch of UTXOs that are under 100,000 sats. So one of the things that I was really bullish on was this idea of, and the problem is, so you could theoretically in Samurai Wallet then take that toxic change that is linked to whatever source that it originated from, and you can combine that with your other toxic change to go into a larger pool size. But that's obviously bad practice because you link those transactions together on chain. It's the common input ownership heuristic all over again. So
rule of thumb is just don't do that. But unless you know what you're doing and you're combining from the same source and all this stuff. But rule of thumb is don't do that.
Right. It's more than rule of thumb. In the wallet itself, when you do it, it says, do you want to mark this unspendable as toxic change? And basically, the default is to just leave it there. Now, you had this, there was this concept being floated around, and I haven't heard much about it since, but this idea of multi-party transaction zeros, where you go in with like a couple trusted buddies, because they can obviously see your transactions that you add, and you all go into a new round together. So that common input ownership heuristic is broken. So no one knows if it's four people going into a transaction zero together with their toxic change, or if it's one person that's combining toxic change and going into a transaction zero. Is that still something that is on the Samurai roadmap, or has that been discarded as a concept?
No, that's certainly on the roadmap. I believe it's been coded, and I believe it's in the testing process now.
Well, that's awesome. Another aspect of the multiple pools is that, and I brought it up earlier to the people watching the video stream, and I'll bring it up one more time. Freak Hyperbole created this tracking website. It's bitcoinkpis.com/privacy. And he's tracking the different activity among the different pool sizes. And one of the aspects here is that they're distinct liquidity pools. So as you add more pool sizes, you're breaking up the liquidity of the user base, and so you're breaking up the total anon set that the user can achieve in any given pool. So I'm curious, like, how much thought is given into when you add additional pools? What size? Like, what is your thinking in regard to adding more pool sizes or removing pool sizes, stuff like that?
Yeah, it's a great question. No, we're very conservative when it comes to adding pools. You theoretically could remove a pool, but it's kind of like one of those things. Like, it'd be really a real pain to do it. So we like to think that once a pool's there, it's always there. So we want to be careful when issuing or launching a new pool, because it's very easy to do, but we don't want to fracture liquidity. So one of the bare minimum things that we do is make sure that the pools that are closest in proximity to the denomination are stable and are flowing freely, so to speak. So when we added the newest pool we have is the 0.001 pool, and that was added once we were comfortable with the 0.01 pool in terms of how many mixes it was getting a day, the average kind of waiting time a premixer could expect. And you always worry a little bit that it's going to cannibalize the other pools, but so far we don't see that, because it certainly doesn't harm the anon set, because for the most part users are staying in the pool that they initially went into with the UTXOs and engaging in free remixing, because that's what the incentives kind of align towards. So it's about taking away new liquidity that would have gone to the pool, but now there's another option. And that was the primary worry, but so far it hasn't been realized. The 001 pool has been very popular, and it brings with brand new users who are just totally priced out of Whirlpool to begin with. So it really just opened the doors to a brand new user base which is what our goal was with that pool. Now and that's the same exact reason why we won't open a larger pool yet, which we get requests all the time for like a 1 Bitcoin pool or even larger. But we don't feel that the 0.5 pool has reached that level of maturity yet. It's still too unpredictable.
Appreciate that answer. Last week we had Craig Raw on of Sparrow Wallet, and we had Keto Miner on, and one of the discussions was this idea of integrating Whirlpool into Sparrow Wallet, and I feel like it's an under discussed aspect of your aspirations with Whirlpool. This idea that you can easily implement Whirlpool into other wallets and provide an incentive for those wallet devs in terms of they get a portion of their users' Whirlpool fees. You want to, like, is this something that you're actively you would like to see, that you would like to see other wallets implement Whirlpool as well, so that they're part of the same liquidity pool as Samurai users?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it was designed like that from the get-go. It was designed to be able to be used by multiple clients, multiple diverse clients, if we could get other people to use it. So we're very happy to talk with any wallets who want to implement it. It's a great way to bring fantastic privacy to their users, to monetize their wallets, because as you said, the coordinator fee can be shared between the two wallet developers. And it's a great way to diversify the liquidity pool of the Whirlpool for all users. So it's essentially like adding a bunch of new Dojo only users to the Whirlpool coordinator, right? You can kind of think of it like that, because the Samurai wallet server for non-Dojo users knows the XPubs of those users. The Whirlpool server doesn't. But since we operate both servers, though they're independent, some users are concerned about that. So the mitigation, of course, is to run Dojo. But if you don't run Dojo, Samurai server has your XPub. The mitigation in this sense of other wallets implementing Whirlpool is there's a whole new entrance of liquidity from and the Samurai wallet server has no knowledge of those wallets, their balances, their UTXOs, their addresses, or anything about them. And the Whirlpool coordinator, of course, doesn't need to know any of that stuff, right? It doesn't need to know wallet history or anything. It's blinded. So it's a really solid benefit for us as coordinator to get a more diverse liquidity pool. There's a nice incentive for the external wallet developers. And it's an overall win for users. And even if the wallet developers wanted to, we're hyper competitive with each other. Let's say we were competing for the exact same user, and we were on desktop as well, and we had a contentious relationship or something like that. They could still build it in, and the market could determine based on the quality of post-mix tools, based on all these different aspects of the wallet. But at the core fundamental mixing, the user is getting the best in class mixing in both. You kind of know what I mean there. So we're super interested in anyone reaching out to us, but specifically Craig, because it's a Java implementation, and he has a Java wallet. It's kind of a match made in heaven. I think it'd be a very easy implementation.
Right. In Sparrow, it's different because he doesn't run his own servers. By default, it chooses Electrum servers, and he has a recommended list of public Electrum servers that he thinks have good reputations in terms of privacy. And you obviously can also use your own node. And with that, I've repeated this many times on the show, but if you don't use your own node, you're trusting someone else's node with your transactions, and there's a privacy concern there. If even if there was a wallet like Ledger Live, where it's default light client wallet, it helps mitigate that risk of basically a lot of Samurai Light client users all being in the pools together, because you'd also have Ledger Live Light client users, or you'd have Blue Wallet Light client users, or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah, it just creates a very diverse pool. So it's great. So that's the thing about Whirlpool. It's agnostic to how the client derives addresses, how it runs balances, how it takes care of you. It doesn't matter to Whirlpool, the coordinator, right? So Sparrow can do it one way, and then all these other wallets, maybe one's an SPV wallet, it does it that way. The other wallet, has another type of thing. Doesn't matter. They can all tie into Whirlpool, and from the user perspective, their liquidity pool has grown, and they're all from different services, right?
And all the different providers would have to basically collude to reduce the onset behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So I'd like to see that more.
Yeah, it's a perfect. I think it's perfectly aligned incentives for wallet developers to implement it. We think that the proof is in the pudding in terms of Whirlpool transactions. We think they're proven, they're effective, they're high entropy, we'll eventually be at the point, we're not there yet, where we can start to increase the number of inputs and outputs. So instead, maybe we'll see a 7 input, 7 out Whirlpool transaction soon, maybe a 10 in, 10 out. That just increases the number of combinations, amount of entropy that are in the transactions. So I think it's a bright future, and especially as more wallet developers realize that this is a solid way to grow their wallet, get support for their wallet, and provide their users a valuable tool. So they can contact us anytime. We'll definitely talk about implementations.
Awesome. Another thing we discussed on last week's show was this idea of the BIP47 payment codes. You call them paynims. It's this idea that in a relatively private way, you can have a static text string that allows you to send transactions repeatedly, whether that's a friend or a business partner, or if it's donations. I think a big one is donations. I mean, obviously, this show runs on donations, so that is one reason why I'm focused on it. But it's also because I've been doing a lot of work in activist circles, and they don't want to run a BTC Pay server. They don't want to run something so heavy in order to have some kind of private donations received to them. They operate in situations that have, in a lot of ways, way more dangerous threat models, because they have authoritarian regimes or whatnot that they're working against, and they're doing active surveillance against them. So one of the things that Keto Miner said, and I had never really considered this, is in the way the spec works is there's way more node overhead on a user's node, or even worse, a public node, if you have many peers that you're using paynims with, because you have to track the addresses of each individual peer as well to make sure that you received a payment or not. I'm curious if this is something that you guys have struggled with, in terms of paynim usage, because I mean that is, you're the only wallet that supports it right now.
I wouldn't say we've struggled with it. I wouldn't say that it increases overhead, so to speak. I mean, maybe in a way it does, but I mean, any user's dojo is already handling this, and it's doing it fine. In dojo language, we use the term loose address. So what the dojo knows about, or the Samurai server knows about, is what your wallet, the address that your wallet has derived that is unique between your payment code and your counterpart's payment code. And that doesn't get, it's because this address is outside of your XPub space. This isn't associated with an XPub at all. It's completely different model. So this would be stored by the dojo. And when the wallet makes the call to retrieve balances and transactions and UTXOs from your dojo, it would ask for your XPubs, but also include these loose addresses. So the overhead isn't that much. It's just some more addresses to keep track of. So dojo is fine and can handle it fine. I think we're serving something like 400,000 paynims right now, of varying usage. Currently, I will say that there are usability challenges within Samurai Wallet for traditional paynims that we're aware of. We've implemented paynim right from the start, so we have version 1 of the spec, and we're working on implementing version 3 of the spec, which takes care of a lot of the usability challenges associated with paynims today. But overall, no, it's not a huge challenge to overcome.
You don't hear from like dojo users saying that their node is struggling from BIP47 usage.
No, not at all. I mean, the most we'll see is something like my dojo missed that transaction, right? So they need to rescan, and so it can find it again. And
it's more of a UX issue.
Yeah, exactly. Or something is timed out perhaps in one of the requests from the wallet to the dojo, and that can just be due to Tor being kind of flaky. It can be a bug in our code that we haven't found yet, where that killed the connection. So that could be a number of things. But as far as a strain, no. I mean, if you're running like a Ronin node, for example, you have pretty phenomenal uptime on pretty modest hardware. So I think most people with normal Panem activity are not having any issues at all with that particular aspect of it.
Well, that's great. I mean, for me, the main issue I have with Paynims is that it's Samurai only. Obviously, that means that someone who's donating needs to be an Android user that's using Samurai Wallet. In your opinion, why do you think that we haven't seen more BIP47 adoption? Like, why don't we have Paynims in other wallets right now?
I think it's kind of a tough bit to implement. And it has been true for a long time. There was never any complete library support in any of the major languages. There was attempts to start, and then the project kind of fizzled out because it was just like a lone contributor. But they made good progress, and hopefully someone would pick it up, that kind of thing. TDev wrote the early test vectors for the bit, replicated the test vectors. So there has been working code, but you would have to go through, the repo, parse the Java, and then convert it to whatever language you're working with. So I think there's been, a challenge on the implementation side of things. And the fact that it's not, a straightforward implementation. There's a lot of crypto that's involved, so at low-level crypto, especially with version 1 and the notification address and exchanging signatures and all this sort of thing. I think that the discouragement by the core development or developers of around the time that the proposal was first introduced also kind of just dampened the enthusiasm around it, for the exception of us and a few other wallets who went ahead with implementing it, but unfortunately are just no longer around. They folded a couple of years after. So we're the only wallet that has it currently, and it's just one of those things that hopefully other wallets will realize that their users can be really well served by this type of functionality. And it is a perfect use case for donations, and it's a perfect use case for Bitcoin businesses who want to pay their staff's salary or their payrolls, or any other kind of payments like that. So there's a lot of potential. It can be used as an identity system. It can be used in all sorts of ways. And we've only scratched the surface of BIP47. So we're looking forward to exploring that further.
So, I mean, you mentioned the discouragement of usage by Bitcoin core developers at the time. If I recall correctly, the main concern was chain space usage, that it was inefficient in terms of chain space usage, and if fees go up, it would get prohibitively expensive. Is that correct? That
was one of the arguments. It was specifically that there was an op-return transaction required for what is termed in the BIP as the notification transaction. This is the on-chain transaction that exists that allows both clients to retrieve the Panem data from a mnemonic restore, right? So without the use of a central third-party server, they can use the blockchain to restore and get their Panem connection that way. I'm not opposed to the blockchain or op-return transaction. I'm opposed to it because it's a UX nightmare. The user first has to initiate this transaction before kind of to set up their channel, quote unquote, to send to this person later. It inhibits the use of the feature. So I don't think that's a reason to discourage use of stealth addresses in Bitcoin. I think that by and large, stealth addresses with the trade-offs are a win either way, and that's what Paynims provide. But luckily, in version 3, that whole concept of the notification transaction is dramatically altered, and it's taken away. And I believe Craig went into this already on the last episode, but it's a bare multi-sig transaction that's replaced, and that can be a part of any transaction that the wallet is creating. It can kind of just hop along and be completely scalable in that sense, and not cost the user anything other than just the small amount of added weight to the transaction. So these things solve themselves over time, but that was one of the reasons for discouragement, was the op return transaction, and that was primarily Luke Jr., I believe, and then Gregory Maxwell had a objection to it, but there was a fundamental misunderstanding in his objection, because he conflated paynim.is, which is a centralized name server that we run, where we take a payment code that the wallet on client side generates and apply a algorithm to provide a SHA-256 representation in the form of an image, the robot images of that payment code. That's all.
It's both the image and the user readable name, right? Like Young Poetry 985 or whatever, instead of the long ass string that's the real payment code.
Right. So, but his criticism conflated paynim.is, which is a centralized database, with the requirement of the user to use that centralized database to restore and get the state of the UTXOs, which is ironic because that was the exact thing that Luke Jr. was against in the form of the notification transaction, which provides that blockchain-based state. So
if you can restore from seed, and you can still get everything because it's on the chain.
Correct. Right. That was the whole idea of this notification transaction. So it was what was looked at as a necessary evil that would hopefully be taken care of later on, right? And lo and behold, later on has occurred, and it has been taken care of. So that's no longer an issue. Users for the last few years have had to put up with the burden of creating this op return transaction and paying a little bit more to get stealth addresses. But they still got stealth addresses, and we've never had a complaint from users. The only complaint we've had is that it was a cumbersome process that it's hard to onboard new users to, and we completely agree. So hopefully it will get better soon.
Yeah, I think there was just another kind of criticism I am aware of, which is the practical kind of usage or implementation of it. That it doesn't really matter much that we are doing all this computation overhead. I mean, there will be like some added scanning to the chain, and needing to kind of filter all blocks or transactions through, looking for these kind of hidden messages, which wouldn't be in the block header. So that would be a deeper kind of parsing of the blocks. But on the end, if the user takes and just merges all the outputs which have been received through these paynims, then the whole sales address thing would lose its kind of main purpose, right? I mean, obviously this can be discouraged, and education, etc. But I think that was another thing which was kind of came up in the discussion.
Yeah. I mean, and it's all these are valid points of discussion, and exactly what the BIT process is for, to discuss these things in the open. But I think what hampered the development of BIT 47, or at least the excitement amongst wallet developers, wasn't any of those reasons. It was the label that the BIT maintainer applied that was quote unquote unanimously discouraged for implementation. And I think that was enough to kind of just, actually, you have to rewind a bit to the era, and this was in the height or the start of the block size wars and the Bcash wars. And the author of the BIP was a big blocker. So he already had that going against him. So there was already prejudice against him for that. And it may sound silly to viewers now, but that's the reality of the time, that he was looked at suspiciously. And despite the fact that he had a valid proposal, it was moved to the state. Another BIP that was unanimously discouraged for implementation, of course, was BIP 39. Now, luckily, that hasn't had the same response. The wallet developers implemented it anyway. because it's a fundamentally better structure for implementing these mnemonic words. It's a standardized
That's the seed
structure.
backups.
It's
That
the
everyone's
mnemonic
familiar
words specifically.
Your secret word phrase, freaks.
Yeah, so that's also by the same, most of the same developers applied the label unanimously discouraged for implementation. Now, I think that to an extent, the core developers and the people who reply on these BIP threads to form a consensus need to be able to have opinions that are contrary and critical. You have to be able to fight it out in the comments and get your ideas out there, and ultimately the market will decide. And that's what was our thinking. Well, we're not going to wait for an approval from anyone. We're going to do it because we see the potential there. Now it's just, hopefully with version 3, it's going to be easier to implement for wallet developers. I think maybe there's going to be more libraries available, which just make it 10 times easier for developers to implement. And we'll see other wallets implementing it, and I think that would be fantastic. And another thing that we welcome anyone to use the paynim.is database directory if they want to supply payment codes and get back a bot image and name for their users. Those aren't Samurai Wallet specific, or they don't have to be.
That's great. I think this is all very insightful. To me personally, my biggest concern has been on-chain fees, and it's also been my concern with CoinJoin as well, because if on-chain fees go up, both become prohibitively expensive, which is why for like the last 6 months, I've been more focused on basically that are trying to accomplish a similar case but use Lightning, such as LRL or KeySend. I am not a perfect person, and my understanding of Bitcoin continues every day. One of the reasons I love this show is because I learn alongside the freaks, and we all learn together. And I have admitted that I have pie on my face right now because, as you can see, if you're watching the video stream, 1 sat per byte is confirming in the next transaction. So I'm curious on what your viewpoint is, because OpenObs mentioned it earlier as well, talking about using Lightning as a post-mix tool, right? Which is this idea that even, you use Whirlpool, you have like a nice 5 million sat UTXO, you put it in a node and you use that for spending, and then, after a certain amount of time, you burn it and do a new node to try and use Lightning as a post-mix tool that has reduced fee burden. I'm curious on your opinion here. Do you think that fees will rise over time? Do you think we'll have a sustained high fee environment, or do you think, in 2 years, 3 years, there'll be periods where you're going to be able to, get 1 sat per byte into the next block?
Well, fees better rise over time, because I don't know how else the network is going to be secured once the subsidy runs out, the block reward runs out. So, the idea has always been that a fee market, quote unquote, would be developing or developed by this point. We don't see that necessarily now, as you mentioned. But we didn't expect it. I think you've mentioned that we predicted the kind of a low fee environment for a little while still, and that's because I think part of it's because the de facto layer 2 has become the custodial providers like Cash App and Robinhood and Grayscale and whatnot. These are the true layer 2 of Bitcoin, and you're getting a lot of your number go up crowd onboarding via these methods, and that's taking pressure off the main chain.
Yeah, I agree 100% on that. I think, and that's what's funny about Dispatch is that we get all into the weeds, right? But the first step is like we need people to fucking take their coins off of these custodial platforms. But so you agree with me that you think at least a healthy Bitcoin is one that's going to end up in a sustained high fee environment.
Well, my understanding of Bitcoin is that it has to ultimately end up in that state. There has to be a fee environment. so miners are incentivized to continue mining when they don't have a block reward.
So I 100% agree. So what are your thoughts on, CoinJoin usage? Private Bitcoin usage in general is going to have a higher on-chain burden. Whether that's a pay join or whether that's a Stonewall transaction or whether that's a Whirlpool transaction or whether that's a Paynim transaction. So I'm curious, where do you see, we're struggling to get users. I mean, it's been good to see usage go up of these tools, but in a high fee environment, are you concerned at all about usage getting limited because it gets just so cost prohibitive? And if that's the case, what do you have a strategy, or is the idea just, it's still a little bit off, and we'll cross that bridge when we cross it?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, we've sustained pretty high fee environments for quite a long time. We were around during the Roger Ver block size wars, where he potentially spammed the network, or someone spammed the network for a good year and a half, if not longer, and created, really just awful conditions as a pretext for, needing bigger blocks. Basically, was the idea behind that. And that was a strain on not only our infrastructure, but on users' usage, but really not to a huge degree. We expected it to be a bigger drain on usage. It was more of a drain on infrastructure. So we've shored up infrastructure. We know we can handle sustained periods of blocks in terms of having chains of unconfirmed transactions and transactions dropping from the mempool. Like we're experiencing all of these events at this point. In terms of becoming too cost prohibitive, I don't see it happening in the near immediate future or the medium to long term future. I think it's actually it's going to become a real problem for Bitcoin that we need to as a community need to look at and discuss as the layer twos continue to strengthen. The custodial layer twos that I'm talking about, the PayPals and whatnot. This is going to become exacerbated. But second or third to all that, we are focused on chain, and that's been our mission statement from day one. So if it means that our users are going to have to, at that point in the future, become a different type of user who's more comfortable spending a different amount to be able to interact with the Bitcoin main chain, I think that will be a success for Bitcoin. That'll be a good place to be in. We'll see if our users are willing to do that, or if we're willing to attract users who are willing to do that. Because I think there will always be a market for on-chain transactions. Yeah, and that's where our primary interest is.
Yeah, can I just say
Yes.
that and here is I'm just looking at the Clarkmore's dashboard, and it says that average fees per block is 0.08 0.38 BTC, so like 1/3 BTC, and average fees versus reward is like 5.6%. So even with this kind of empty blocks coming, you have still like 5% of the block reward is coming from the fees. So I'm just thinking that yes, I expect more pressure on the blocks as well, but I can also see that if for like a real fee market, you might have periods when you would need smaller blocks, right? But the most important thing is I don't think that we would change either direction. They would just, block size just stays as it is. But the purchasing value of Bitcoin does go up, as we know. And if we are talking about like, halving epochs of 4, 8, 12 years, then, for example, in 12 years, the purchasing value will be likely to cover a quite similar block reward in purchasing value as it is now, of which now there is only 5% fees are, but we have a 20 times increase in the purchasing value, then how much do you want to spend on security? Like, hardware gets more efficient, etc. It might not be that necessary, right? I mean, we don't know if it happened, and we don't know if it is a problem if it isn't, right? So that means that the on-chain privacy tools will just remain to be used, and they might take up the majority of the on-chain usage at some point, because then you go for layer 2 for convenience as well as, well, I mean, if we mentioned the also need to improve and improving privacy aspects of Lightning, but people also use Lightning because it's this fast instant settlement, and which you don't have on chain.
So,
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Matt. Sorry.
so Samurai, we have you here. I tend to agree with OpenArm's premise. I have gotten a lot of shit from the Samurai crew for not the official Samurai crew, but the many group chats that I participated in with you guys, for my vocalization of my expectation that Bitcoin purchasing power will increase with adoption, which is the expectation that OpenArms just mentioned. And do you think that is an expectation that we should not be operating under, or?
No, I mean,
I'm curious on your views.
We've seen it in action now for a number of years that it's waves, so we have adoption waves that correspond to number go up or ramp up in price. You'll of course lose some of the people that came on for the ride, but you're always left with a larger group of people. That's how it's played out so far. I think there's a lot of UTXOs out there from Bitcoin services that do operate on chain, and there's lots of them, that are not publicly vocal. They're on Twitter. You don't know about them, but they're out there doing their thing. They collect fees. They do however they monetize. There's a lot of UTXOs that many would consider close to dust or pushing it there, and certainly will become a lot more worth a lot more as the value of Bitcoin increases in terms of US dollar. And there's going to be an incentive to be able to efficiently move those transactions, whether that be to a second layer or not. They need to be moved to that second layer. So there has to be an on-chain transaction. So I think that there's still incentive and there's still innovative things that haven't even occurred yet or even been thought of yet, that can occur on the main chain, on the base layer. And personally, I mean, I'm not, as you know, I'm not very bullish on Lightning. I think that as it was described by OpenArms was accurate, but I don't necessarily see it as a privacy tool. I see it as a bank-ready tool, and I see the majority of usage being via custodial methods, and I think that that's only going to increase and grow over time. And I don't necessarily think that should have been the quote unquote blessed scaling solution. I think it was available at a time in Bitcoin's history where a scaling solution was drastically needed to counter a narrative. I don't necessarily think a scaling solution, well, we can see, look at the mempool, a scaling solution wasn't drastically needed. But the Bitcoin community took that bait and said, hey, well, we have Lightning, and it just wasn't ready. And no one had really examined the consequences of a system like this, building a system in this way, and the potential for regulatory capture. So I'm just not very bullish on Lightning. If it succeeds and it's primarily done in a non-custodial way, I'll chalk it up as a win for Bitcoin. But I do I do wonder about the potentials that were missed out on in terms of other projects or other layer 2 ideas that maybe, had we had the benefit of time and not being rushed into something, could have emerged. But that could always emerge in the future still. So nothing's written in stone here. But I don't see Lightning as that escape route off from the main chain. I see it as just another Swift in the making, really.
Yeah, I mean, I think me and OpenArms share similar concerns. I mean, I don't want to speak for OpenArms, but that's one of the reasons why I've been pushing for more sovereign Lightning usage, because it is quite obvious that a significant amount of the usage is either custodial or even worse, like regulated custodian.
Exactly. And that's really bad on Lightning.
But
Yeah.
so far, it is completely permissionless and keeps growing in terms of sovereignty. And people not even using it from need, but it keeps growing even without the need. Because how I sell Lightning to people, I mean, why do I run a node? I mean, why should someone go on and use Lightning? Is basically the availability of the instant settlement, which is not possible there are only more trusted ways which is possible, and also the saving on fees. I mean, if you want to send 100 sets around, you still won't be able to do it. If you send 10,000 sets around, you still won't be able to do it on chain efficiently. So again, coming back to the original, or where our conversation started, that what kind of communities people would adopt Bitcoin faster and earlier, it is quite likely that will be the ones who won't be the whales, who won't have that much fiat money available, that they wouldn't care about that. Even the 100 satoshis, or the 200, 500 satoshis they need to spend on an on-chain transaction, when they are sending those minuscule kind of values around. So I think it's incredibly important in that sense, and it not everyone can, and not so. Even we have 8 billion people, even if a couple of billion adopt Bitcoin, they won't just get one UTXO per person. That would need to be a family or a village controlling a UTXO, and how else could it be other than a layer 2 solution?
I agree. Open on to that. I've always said that we've known from the start that for Bitcoin to scale to any sort of mass number of people, there has to be layer 2 or even layer 3 technologies. My point of contention is that I don't necessarily think that Lightning, is that the best solution for the job. But to reiterate your first point, the first thing you said, it's a permissionless system, and absolutely 100% agree. And I respect anyone who's working on it in that way. 100%. We just don't see a future with it in Samurai. But we don't wish to discourage anyone from working on it or using it. In fact, many of our users use Lightning, and they incorporate Lightning into their post-mix strategy. So it's nothing like that. The only thing I'll take issue with what you said, and this is a broader kind of point, is, but I've made hundreds of thousands of transactions, like peer-to-peer transactions to a merchant, for goods and or services. And I can't honestly say that I've ever had a single time where I was wishing for the finality of that transaction to be instant. I don't really ever remember an issue waiting for a few confirmations or 6 confirmations or 12 confirmations. If it's an online transaction, even more so. And if it's an in-person low value transaction, I've never had a bar or a cafe ask me to wait around for the transaction to confirm. And just in practice when I've spent over the years since 2012. So I don't think that aspect is necessarily important to users. I think the aspect of saving on fees is what's important to users. But even during the high fee environment that we experienced in the earlier parts of the year and last year, we did not really see a large increase in Lightning transactions, inbound into Lightning. We would have, and I expected to see a larger increase. So there's another disconnect there. So we know that users want to save on fees, but users on a large scale either don't know about Lightning or have determined that Lightning doesn't work for them, even if on-chain fees are in the 1 to 300 sat per byte region. So that's a little, that requires deeper introspection, I suppose.
I think it's I think it has a lagging effect. The high fee environment, what we have seen a couple of months ago, or like in for a couple of months, a couple of weeks ago, or so. So that's not a good time to deploy liquidity to Lightning, right? So it didn't grow then because it was obviously needing multiple on-chain transactions to kind of like build up a node to serve others, and things like that would be significant spending then. But now, after this event, even then the overall interest in like Bitcoin is not looking to be very high at the moment, but the growth of the Lightning Network has picked up to a level it wasn't seen before. Like the capacity is like 1800 BTC just now. I'm looking at it with like 23% growth on the week. That is not like the usual number. So it seems like that now people have this time they have experienced that they had high fees, and now there is a low fee period. Now they can deploy and open those channels and get ready for the next wave of peaking usage and of the on-chain space. So yeah,
I think that's true. I think that's true, but only to a small extent. I think it's a wider problem that. It's maybe it's a problem. It depends on your perspective, but I think that Bitcoin users in 2021, and it's been true for a long time, just aren't spending on stuff. They don't buy things with Bitcoin and transact in Bitcoin. They primarily are buying Bitcoin, sending it. The best case is sending it to themselves in a cold storage, but a lot of them are just buying Bitcoin and storing it on the exchange. But there's not a lot of transactional activity occurring, I think, and that comes from the huddle mentality, that comes from the number go up kind of mentality, but ultimately it just comes from the point where that users just don't need to spend it, right? They don't see the value in spending it when it can appreciate in value by letting it sit there. Yeah. Whereas there's a whole class of users, and a lot of them are Samurai users, and I would consider myself one of them, that require it. We need to spend it because we earn it primarily. We don't have another method. So spending is essential. And we've been doing that for all these years. And I just think the available pool of users who want to interact with Bitcoin in that way has shrunk since all of the new entrants.
Like shrunk in versus the overall users or the overall
exactly. We're people who have that as their core kind of proposition. Their reason for being here, right, is maybe they're opting out of the system. Maybe they require transactional privacy for a transaction that is taboo in their country. Whatever the reasons are, they're still around. But there's more people who are using it as an investment asset versus a transactional asset, when as far like in my head, it's both, you know, and I need my investment asset in the short term just as much as I need it in the long term. So I spend more. And I think it's kind of based on when you got into Bitcoin, I think, that can kind of predict how often you transact with Bitcoin, like true transactions. Maybe it's buying web hosting, maybe it's domain names, whatever, you know.
Yes, but yeah, the same way I think the usage in as a medium of exchange would make Lightning usage higher as well as, you know, as well as the on-chain. So it goes kind of parallel. And you do, and as like watch the comments like about this, Anthony said, you know, it's not efficient to have like a high Lightning capacity. There is you cannot really compare it to for example, the amount of liquidity which is sitting in Whirlpool, or like even offered in joint market, you know, or what people are you know, holding in their cold storage wallets, because it's just a very kind of specific use case which you need, and it can serve, you know, an unlimited amount of transactions in a quite big mesh network already. So I hope to see more Lightning usage, but it won't necessarily will be obvious from looking at the kind of capacity growing, but it will be just obvious from the services and the things you will be able to do with Lightning and on Lightning. And even now speaking, you know, with like from like DLCs to like, you know, client side filtering on with like RGB and, you know, all these kind of things which are made possible with the technology, with the payment channel technology. But that doesn't, you know, obviously that doesn't invalidate the on-chain usage and the way that you can be the most private with, you know, the coin joins and the postmix tools and things like that. That you will need to always fall back to that, and that's a foundation to build on. And, you know, I very much like to see, like, you know, Samurai Wallet continue to concentrate on it, and, you know, we'll be using on it because it's the right tool for the job.
Just to jump in here real quick, I mean, I think a lot of this is growing pains on both sides. I think it's, you know, I'm not saying, and I will never say that Lightning is a sure thing, and maybe it's the wrong tool. But you know, I think, first of all, I think Bitcoin's use as a medium exchange will only go up. It's had some bad years recently, but I think like as users, as people start realizing, especially with the decline of cash, start realizing the need for censorship-resistant payments, more people will spend Bitcoin as they realize that need, and they have no other option. You know, Bitcoin is meant for those payments. Unless you earn 100% Bitcoin, it's meant for those payments you can't make otherwise. So I expect that to increase. Also, you know, with Lightning, it's still very early, you know, so I think it'll take some time. I think on the privacy side, just one, you know, Bitcoin, Lightning has a lot of difficulties in terms of receiving privately, which concern me. But on the sending side, especially if you're a more technical user and you realize the trade-offs that are being made, which is part of the UX hurdle of Lightning as it currently stands, and you take certain precautions in terms of, you know, not holding a long-standing balance or a long-standing node, and you use it basically as a batch spend for postmix. My single favorite part about spending via Lightning is that there's no change output, and because that change output is like, from a UX side, I mean, we're so far into here now. I mean, we didn't even talk about like coin control or labeling, which most wallets don't have. But like, you spend to a merchant, or even worse, you deposit into a regulated exchange, and you have that change output. That change output's just sitting there waiting to fuck you, privacy wise. But you don't have that with Lightning.
Yeah. The change output is, you know, it's a subject, or it's a product of the UTXO architecture, and it's a challenge to be overcome. Luckily, if it's, you know, above 0.001 BTC, then throw it into Whirlpool.
Yeah, I mean, Samurai's unique in that regard because you have, you know, very good advanced coin control and you have labeling. but most wallets do not.
Yeah, no, it's a serious issue. I mean, it's a serious privacy issue with Bitcoin currently, and it's something that ultimately could be solved on the protocol layer with confidential transactions. But let's be honest, that's not going to happen. There's various reasons for that. So we have to deal with it on the application side, and that's what Samurai does. That's what Join Market does, and all we can do is continue to make those tools. I don't know that this awakening is going to happen and they're all going to go on to like the layer 2, like Lightning. I think that Lightning is designed for a mass market, and I think the reality is the mass market rather use something that's easier, like Venmo. And I just think it's going to have an uphill battle unless it finds like a real niche and great use case, and that hasn't been discovered yet. And like you said, it's still early, so it still can be discovered. That makes it like really compelling. I don't know. I don't see it growing past a certain plateau. And as OpenNom said, the only way we can really tell is with the numbers that get released by services like Bitrefill and others who have implemented Lightning for many years now, and they tend to do that yearly. So last year it was something like, Dash had more transaction volume in Bitrefill than Lightning did. We'll see if the 2021 numbers are any different at the end of the year. I would expect it goes up a little bit, but nothing dramatic, because I don't think the use case is there for Bitcoin. And if there is that awakening, you better hope that all of these tools that we're Samurai Wallet and Join Market and the others are prepared, and have done enough in the time that we have had, because they're gonna need the tools, and they're not going to be sophisticated. They're not going to know about the coin control, like you said. They're not going to know about these things. They're just going to be looking for solutions to problems.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we have Anthony in the comments, Anthony Ronning, he was also on the show, and he's mentioning that you still have issues with the actual open close on chain with Lightning. There's a lot of privacy gotchas. And we do talk about them a lot on Dispatch, and I don't want to diminish them.
All things in Bitcoin. Yeah. That's everything in Bitcoin. Privacy gotchas everywhere.
Exactly. Guys, so I mean, we're nearing 3 hours. I think this has been a fantastic conversation. I really appreciate both of you. I hope the freaks appreciated this conversation. I think they will. Do you guys have anything you want to discuss before we wrap this up?
I have nothing to announce or anything like that, but it's been a great discussion. I was happy to be here, and great to chat with you, OpenNoms, and Odell, you, Matt, for the first time.
Yes, same with me. It was a really good discussion, and we covered a lot of things. And yes, thank you.
It's been an absolute pleasure, guys. I appreciate you. Just one more shout out for our guests. That's at Samurai Wallet on Twitter and at OpenNoms on Twitter. To the freaks, I hope you found this conversation useful. Privacy is extremely important. We expect Bitcoin to be around for a long fucking time. We expect the chain to be around for a long fucking time. Please care about your privacy. Please start seeking out resources and trying to learn how to use the tools before you absolutely need them, because when you need them, it might be too late. With this discussion, all 3 major CoinJoin implementations have been discussed on Citadel Dispatch. You can go back Wasabi at Citadel Dispatch 15, Join Market at Citadel Dispatch 16. Do your own research, look into all this stuff, and just try and advance yourself. Thank you, guys. Appreciate you all.
Thank you. Hope to be back again soon.
Yeah, we're going to make that happen. Cheers, guys.
Looking forward.
Would you like to sing? Is our latest record. Or our latest electronic noise, depending on whose side you're on. Any road, we'd like to carry on with it. It's the last number. We'd like to thank you all for being so wonderful. And it's called Help. 1, Help! I need somebody. Help! Not just anybody. Help! You know I need someone. Help! When I was younger, so much younger than today, I never needed anybody's help in any way. But now these days are gone, I'm not so self-assured. Now I find I've changed my mind and opened up the door. Help me if you can, I'm feeling down. And I do appreciate you being around. Help me get my feet back on the ground. Won't you please, please help me? And now my life has changed in oh so many ways. My independence seems to vanish in the hate. And now these days are gone, I'm not so self-assured. Know that I just need your light, I've never done before. Help me if you can, I'm feeling down. And I do appreciate you being around. Help me get my feet back on the ground. Won't you please, please help me? When I was younger, so much younger than today, never needed anybody's help in any way. But now these days are gone, I'm not so self-assured. Now I find I've changed my mind and opened up the door. Help me if you can, I'm feeling down. And I do appreciate you being around. Help me get my feet back on the ground. Won't you please, please help me, help me, help me.
Cheers, freaks. I hope you enjoyed that conversation. Love you all. See you on Rabbit Hole Recap on Thursday. Stay humble and stack.